Welcome back to Game Nights at Gary's. During my last video, we took a look at Kingdom Death Monster and did an unboxing. Unfortunately, most of the components were shrink wrapped, and I didn't want to spoil anything for myself, so I couldn't show you guys too much of the components. This time, however, I have had roughly 20 to 30 hours over the past week since I was off work that I could dig deep into it, and I'll be honest, the game basically lived on my table for the past week. With that being said, let's take a look at my impressions for the game. Going in, I was told that it was punishing, and I cannot dispute that at all. It did not feel unfair 90% of the time. There were a few situations I looked at that, going into them, it's almost like you cannot win without prior knowledge, like they set you up to fail. But the whole point of the game is that you keep playing, you keep getting better. There's actually a mechanic built in that after so many game overs, you trigger a milestone that your future games start with other little perks. I won't say that they're bonuses, because sometimes they are things to make the game more difficult, assuming that you've played enough, you should know a little bit more. The game really is about gaining experience, not just your characters, but you as well, until you grow and learn about the monsters and the different events. There's a good chance you will make dumb mistakes. Sometimes they're harmless. You can get out of them with a lucky roll or two, or by sacrificing something here or there. Other times you'll lose an entire party of experienced survivors and not know how your settlement is going to come back from it. The game is played over 30 years, each taking 1 to 2 hours. I made it 14 years into the game, rather. After about 9, I would say I was in a downward spiral. I was spending all my resources just trying to get the tribe to have more babies so it wouldn't be game over the next turn. So I would say I made 9 successfully. After that, I probably could have called it quits and not felt too bad, but I played it out to the bitter end until I just had 2 guys left in the tribe. Can't have any babies with 2 guys no matter how hard they try. I did send them off on a hunt just to learn a little more about something, but that didn't go well for them. I am on my current playthrough right now, my second playthrough. I chose a drastically different path just so I could see some of the other innovations. The cool thing about the game is in between the fights with the monsters, you have a settlement phase where you get to develop your village. You can craft armor, you can build buildings and other things to make it easy on your survivors. My first playthrough, I chose the more morally sound options in my eyes, and they were interesting, but maybe not the best choice. The second game, I did more, we'll say, the more like bankrupt choices, and it made for a completely different experience. The first time around, I had lots of tribe members that I could throw at the monsters. They were more expendable, but they also died far more easily. The second playthrough, my current playthrough, which may or may not be at its last year depending on how the next one goes, my survivors are considerably stronger. I would say most of their stats are 2 to 3 times what the best people on my first time were. But I think I've successfully had maybe 2 babies, and there are events that can kill off 2 or 3 people at a time. Right now, I've got a full party of adventurers and no extra people on the benches, which is kind of scary. We'll see where it goes from there. Maybe I'll make a video detailing the way that campaign went. I did assemble some of the miniatures, so let's cut over to them, and I will show you guys some of the stuff I did. Keep in mind, I am not a professional by any means. I also did not have green stuff to patch some of the gaps and fill it in, but I will let you guys take a look at the models here and see what came in that big old box. One of the things I most enjoyed about Kingdom Death Monsters rulebook was that, unlike other games where they want you to build and construct absolutely everything before you start, the game instructs you only to build exactly what you need to get rolling with the tutorial. To start that first mission, you need the white lion that we've talked about before and your 4 starting survivors. Let me see if I can bring the models up close. Quite a bit of detail on these guys. Both of them pretty well chiseled. And then we have the other 2 survivors here. After those 4, I did the suggested build, which was the intimacy models, to provide another male and female. So if you have more than 2 of each in the party, you would have extra choices to represent your characters. And then the old and young survivors, again, just in case you had 4 of any one gender. Both really cool models. I chose to base all of the survivors on the stone mask bases that came in. They only gave me 10, so I only got a couple of left, saving those for something really special. The last survivor I built was just on an impulse. I really liked the Qatar weapon and wanted to have something to represent my guys. I usually have one in every party just because of the ability of the weapons. Let's take a look at some of the enemies you'll fight. The enemies do come in 2 different types. There are the quarries, which are normal monsters you hunt. And then there are nemesis, which are encounters where they're basically humanoids that show up to mess with your settlement. So these are the 3 common ones that will show up and visit you. The first one is the butcher. If you look close, he is wearing somebody's face as a belt. Not a big fan of that. This guy is the first big challenge you'll face. Get it? Face. He shows up as a compulsory fight. You don't get to choose what to experience, and if you're not prepared, he can break your weapons. And actually, he's, I think, the first one in the game that can start a endless loop that just kicks you to death without any chance of you doing anything about it. The next encounter you have a chance to meet, or you're forced to meet, I guess, the nemesis, is the King's Man here. And you can see what I was talking about with the gaps that need filling in the helmet there. I left plenty of space, so when I get around to painting him, I'll be able to do some cool basing on him. And then the third one that I actually got to fight was a weird encounter. This is the Hand. He's got multiple eyes that open and close during the fight, depending on the equipment you're wearing, that boost his attacks. When I said the game has a learning curve, this is one of the guys that's especially punishing, I think, for new people. If you try and fight him, you will lose. I got my ass handed to me the first time thinking they wouldn't put me up against something I couldn't beat, right? No, you're not supposed to beat him. You're just supposed to survive and hope. I won't go into any further details than that, just in case you guys actually want to play this game and experience it yourself. Let's see here. There are a couple of endgame experiences I know nothing about, but I did build the models, so I will show. We have the Watcher, which is, I don't know, it seems like some kind of ghost with chains and lanterns and robes. Seems cool. I'm looking forward to painting this one. I think it'll be a fun one to do up. I'm not sure what I'll do for the base with this guy. Maybe something swampy looking. And then this is supposed to be the final boss. He's got a really cool looking base he's sitting on, some kind of skull. And he is called the Gold Smoke Knight. This is another one I had issues with gaps. You can see his arm there. The pieces just did not seem to fit together. Eventually I'll get some green stuff and get that filled in. I say that eventually I will. I hope I'll find the time and willpower to do it. And then the last three that I have built are the monsters, the quarry monsters. We'll start with the White Lion. This is one of the ones that I took time to paint up simply because it's one you fight a lot, so I might as well have him look imposing on the table. One of the things that I found funny is they took the time to sculpt a pair of testicles on this lion. And I was joking to my friends with it as I was building it, not realizing that eventually that would come into play on the game. We'll take a look at that later after I showcase the rest of these miniatures. Here is the Screaming Antelope. I do not like this guy. Not a fan of having to chase him down. He runs everywhere and literally makes your guys insane. And then the last one, I think I struggled the most to put this together. I looked online and other people had issues with the current version of this model, so I'm guessing it's not just me. There's lots of gaps and things I have to fill in, and this is one I definitely will get green stuff and work on. So this is the Phoenix, and you can see that compared to one of these poor little survivors. That is a 100mm base, so quite a big guy. If you look in the beak, he actually has a human face. This is supposed to be looks like a mustache and a beard. Kind of creepy. And on the wings, there's all sorts of little hands reaching out. Definitely an unsettling monster. One thing that got me laughing, it does have hands coming out of its butthole. I'm really hoping that's not foreshadowing for something. I don't know if you can get a good look there. There we go. And you can see the gaps are pretty bad on the model. So overall, building the miniatures was something I enjoyed. I still have plenty of sprues of the different armor sets, but I'm not quite ready to dig into them until I know exactly what kind of equipment builds I want to do so I can have the stuff I'll actually use. I do know I need to make something with a bow to represent my ranged characters. So let's jump back to another angle here. Let's take a look at the mechanics and other parts of the gameplay that I didn't get to go into the last video. I will hold up a character sheet here. This is recently deceased Marduk. You can see he had a couple of hunt experience over here. He survived 2 hunts before dying, and this kind of shows how the game can go. He had insanity, so that's basically armor for your brain. He had armor on every location here. Looks like he lost some on his arms. And he had no wounds whatsoever to his body. So he was still in pretty decent shape. Hadn't really taken any big hits. What ended up killing him was just random bleed damage from the Butcher, one of the guys that I said was kind of unfair. Every attack he does not every, but a good portion of attacks he does can make you bleed. Once you get to 5 bleed tokens, you die. The characters are, at the same time, very, very squishy and very resilient. There is no built-in damage that makes you die, but every point of damage you take, when you suffer a wound, you roll a location that will show where it hits, whether it's the head, the arms, the body, waist, or legs. And then you subtract from armor, and then you either take a light wound or a heavy wound. Heavy wounds will knock you down. Any damage past a heavy wound causes a severe wound, where you roll on a chart and see what happens. 1 is generally just straight up you die. 10 is generally you get knocked down and nothing super bad happens, other than the fact that you're knocked down and you gotta wait a turn to get back up, or spend a point from someone else to encourage your character to get up. You can see, let me bring this back up. You can see the stat bonuses he had. So he was lucky enough, he got an extra point in luck, which allows him to crit more. There's these charts over here that trigger different story events when you gain understanding and courage. I did learn the hard way that the first events are generally great. You're rewarded for getting a few points in courage or understanding. If you push to the end, I can see how the events that I experienced would possibly be good, but they were not great for me. You do get to fill in fighting arts, disorders, abilities, and impairments, different things you can get. And then once you're a certain age, based on your hunt experience, you unlock certain other things and stat bonuses. At the first age, you get to select a weapon proficiency. As I said, I chose him as one of my Qatar heroes. The more fights you do with a certain weapon, you get to increase your proficiency. Specialist gives you a bonus ability, and then Master permanently gives Specialist to everybody in your town. So different little things you can add up to gain bonuses. You can kind of see how the sheet is laid out there. Fighting arts are special abilities you can get to help. Some of them are really good, some of them are kind of useless. Disorders are gained when you take a heavy wound on the brain. They're not always bad. There's like a cool one called Immortality that as long as you are insane, you don't take physical damage. Instead, it hits your insanity and then causes mental disorders. Some of the mental disorders can be absolutely awful, like Honorable, where you can't attack the monster while it's knocked down or from behind for an accuracy bonus. Abilities and impairments, different things get you special abilities. Impairments are exactly that. If you take a severe wound, you could lose an eye, you could lose an arm, all sorts of crazy stuff. You can fall in love with a rock and have to carry a rock around in your inventory. So with that being said, monsters take damage a little bit differently. You have a deck full of cards that you flip up for every hit that you've made against them. Each weapon has an accuracy. You roll your dice. Any hits, then you flip up that card, and each one corresponds to a different location. Some locations have something called a critical, where if you roll a Lantern 10, or certain weapons like the Qatar have a bonus that you can roll lower. That luck bonus on Marduk would allow him to roll lower. So with the Qatars, he did a critical hit on 8, 9, or 10, so a 30% chance, which is really good if you're trying to farm different resources off the monsters through criticals. With that being said, let's take a look at one of these monster hit location cards. Let's get that into focus here. There we go. Oh, come on. So, Fuzzy Groin is the name, and it tells you where it hit it. You hit the monster right in the ding-dong. You can see the lantern there shows that it's a critical. If you manage to roll a critical on this, you're going to get a Lion Testes White Lion resource, and then it's going to cause a persistent injury, so some of these get to stick around and affect how the monster acts the rest of the fight. So your attack destroys its healthy genitals, the monster's livid, and it gains +1 damage token. The attacker permanently gains a priority target. The white lion will attack them until the attacker is dead, or the white lion is dead, no exceptions. I can honestly say that I have killed a monster, killed one of the white lions with a critical on the Fuzzy Groin, and it was a fun experience for me. I enjoyed that. The resource cards you get look a little something like this. It's a hefty pair of nuts. What's fun about these are they're actually a requirement for an item called a Frenzy Potion, otherwise known as gas station boner pills. The Frenzy Potion allows you to get an extra speed and an extra strength, so it's easier for you to damage monsters and you throw more dice while you're attacking them trying to hit. It does give you extra insanity, but you do lose the ability to use your survival points, which in some situations it's worth it, not always though. So we'll put those nuts down. There's quite a few little jokes like that in the game that chuckle when they come up. The humor is necessary considering how dark the game is. The art in the rulebook is pretty intense, with the exception of a few things like the intimacy and things like that. Lots of weird mysteries in the game. They don't really explain a lot outright, it seems. Granted, I haven't made it to the end, so maybe I see more. There is, when you go on the hunt events, you roll percentile dice, and there's 100 different events you can see. Some of them are kind of boring stuff you'd expect, like, oh, you tumble into a pool of acid, take some damage, or you trip on a stone, or something dumb like that. Other ones have you meeting a cast of just random characters, and some of them are weird, some of them are creepy. I met a blacksmith at one point with one eye. I think it was a blacksmith. It was a guy in armor, and he made a sword appear on an anvil. I'm going to call him a blacksmith. Lots of cool things that happen in the game. I'm enjoying this a lot. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make it through a full campaign, but I can see myself playing quite heavily for the next few weeks. After that, if it dies down, that's okay. I've got plenty of other games to play, but I can guarantee this is going to be one that I pick back up in the future. I enjoy it. I really, really enjoy playing solo. It's something I can sit down and dive into. My biggest issue with it isn't the difficulty. It's my difficulty at putting it down. When I do a hunt, I want to immediately go back and build my settlement. And once I do that and I build weapons and I get ready for the next hunt, I want to go out and do it, and I have a hard time stopping. And all of a sudden, instead of me going to bed at 9 or 10, it's 2 in the morning, and I realize I've lost too much time. But that's not a terrible problem to have, to enjoy something too much. So with that said, are there any games you guys would like to see me check out or review? Maybe do some gameplay footage of? Go ahead and shoot a comment if there's anything you're interested in. And if you can, please like and subscribe.